Hi guys. I'm Greg. This is my first MAGFest. This is actually pretty cool. So we're going to talk about XCOM a little bit and how we going to run through the aliens and kind of the character customization creation. Sorry, bear with me. I've had a cold the past week, but I'm going to run through that. I'd like to keep this kind of free form actually, and if you guys, have questions, I can go as fast or as slow as you want, and we can run through it. But anyway, that's about it. So, how many people played XCOM? Oh wow, cool. All right. How many people liked XCOM? How many people lost the first time? How many people beat Impossible? Okay.
Liars! How many played the original?
Good. Can you all hear me? Fine.
Yeah.
All right. So, in case you didn't know what XCOM was, it's a game that started probably about 5 years ago, and we worked on it for a very long time. Went through a lot of changes, fairly small team at Firaxis. And if you didn't know what it was, I'm going to start by showing you our E3 trailer, and then we'll dive into the rest of the stuff. So, something fun to look at.
All attempts to contact the invaders thus far have failed. Their only purpose seems to be destruction and chaos. One fact is quite clear. The militaries of the world are severely outgunned. In the absence of a miracle, this could very well be the end of civilization as we know it.
Hello, Commander. In response to the alien threat, this Council of Nations has chosen to activate the XCOM project. You have full command of XCOM headquarters. You must learn more about the enemy to expand our capabilities, as well as the abilities of our operatives.
Forces come in from around the world, from alien ships being blown out of the sky. Military aircraft bearing the markings of no country. Special forces soldiers with weapons and body armor unlike anything you've ever seen.
So, thanks. That was actually done almost entirely in-house, pretty much entirely in-house. So it's funny, all the movies you've seen for XCOM we've actually done internally. I'm lucky enough, before I go any further, I've got a bunch of my guys here that I work with. I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of really talented artists and sound people. And there's no program where, oh yeah, they're trousers. But yeah, so what I'm going to show you, I didn't make any of it, so I'm just lucky enough to work with a bunch of really good guys that are my hands and do amazing work. Anyway, so what is XCOM? If you didn't know what XCOM was before, this past September or October, it's a game that started in 1993 or 94, so it's really old. And there's really nothing like it. There's a lot of games that have tried to be XCOM that aren't XCOM. They just kind of missed whatever it was. And so, that's a pretty daunting task to take over a game that was that old and also that well reviewed. Because how many people played the original XCOM? Okay, so it's probably pretty near and dear to you, and you have opinions, I'm sure. And so, when you have to redesign the Chryssalid, which is one of the most feared aliens ever, or characters ever, it can be a little daunting. Anyway, so we started doing that, And, oops. And so, again, that's the graphics that we were dealing with. That's the original game, 320 by 240, 256 colors. And that's what it looked like. That's the presentation of it. It's an amazing game, fantastic game. But you know, if you're me and you look at this, there's a lot of room for improvement, especially here. Yeah, the UI is terrifically awful. And it's funny, I played it in '95, and going back to when we first started the project, when I first loaded it, I was like, what am I doing? Dunking the geoscape, I was like waiting for a mission. But anyway, yeah, so there's some information here. There's enough that people love. There's not enough to necessarily grab onto in some cases, so it made it kind of hard. The one thing that's funny is that a lot of people, and a lot of the questions I've gotten about XCOM and the previous XCOM is, you know, it's amazing how similar they are, and where, you know, did we really consciously make an effort to adhere to what they did with their character designs or whatever. Honestly, we did and we didn't. The one thing about XCOM that's really amazing is that it actually draws from UFO lore. And that's the common ground where we really meet. And so it makes it a little bit easy to actually steal from some of the things they did or actually look similar to some of the things they did. So the very first thing we did was we redesigned this guy. So this was the very first piece that we started. And this is the Sectoid from '94. He looks a little bit like E.T. Not terribly threatening. When my wife saw this, she actually laughed last night. She was like, she thought that was pretty funny. And then this is where we started. This was one of the first drawings we did for XCOM. And you can see, like, this is what I get from a concept artist. I'm looking at the different silhouettes. For some reason, I was watching Flux, and I was looking like, hey, let's make these guys like super tall. Because with a strategy game and where our camera is, it's if you elongate the form, it actually probably makes it a little better. So I was going to make a 7-foot tall sectoid. Somehow that didn't seem to be such a great idea eventually, and I actually settled on this one right here, number 9. That was pretty much where I wanted to go. So I went back to the concept guy who we hired. He was actually the first guy on the team, but he was working contractually at the time, and I said, can you make him 4 foot or 3 foot now? And so he went back to it and he shortened him. And this is really where the Sectoid started. And so you can see the line drawings of the black and white. So he actually has teeth in the black and white. And then to the final concept. And he really, you know, once we got him, he's one of the very few things that really stuck through the whole project. I mean, he's really the identity of the aliens to me. And so you can actually see how close we actually came to him. And it was, you know, when we start out these things, the concept guys would really actually, they'd look at the original, they'd get a write-up from me, which came from the designer, and we talked for a little bit, and it would be like, okay, look at the original, put it away, go work on it. Because, you know, I didn't want to be a slave to the original, because I didn't think we'd be innovative, but I wanted to at least know where the heritage was coming from. We also, every other Friday, would bring beer in and play the original XCOM for a couple hours for a few months, so that all the guys on the team that had not experienced the original had a chance to know what they were about to get into. So I think we had a really good background to start with. The next thing came along was this guy. And I put these two guys first because I've seen the most grief on forums about how the new Muton isn't nearly as threatening as the old one. Really? So when I started this guy, and the Sectoid was interesting too, because the Sectoid, you know, the only real thing I wanted to stick to was I wanted all the eyes. I wanted him to be a little gray. I wanted him to be that thing that everybody already knew, that you've seen in hundreds of movies. He's not a new idea, but I wanted to make him somewhat fresh, but still recognizable. So that's a pretty strange combination. Yeah, and it's great for concept guys. And make it familiar, but nothing I've ever seen. And I did that a lot. And so this guy, I got into the Muton, and you know, he's supposed to be the soldier. He's of the aliens. He's the foot soldier. He's the foil to the regular soldiers in the game. And so again, not a ton to start with other than a green unitard and a pink face. So when I started out, I wanted to keep the pink face, and I wanted to keep the green armor. That was really what it came down to, was his color key. I wanted to kind of keep the same. And at first, we kind of went the same route that the original game did, that he looked like a pro wrestler. And I'm not showing those images, but at a certain point, I was having a conversation with the art director from Civ 5, and we were talking about it. It was like, he's not primal enough. Like, he looks too human. And so I went back to the concept guy, and I said, you know, I want to make him more primal. I want to hunch him over because he's so big in our grid. There were some height issues, so by bending him over, he's still bulky. But also, he doesn't look like a human. There'd be no confusion. And so this was the first drawing I got. And that's the one I ended up really starting to gravitate toward. That was the posture I wanted. If aliens were football players, he's a linebacker. So he's my Ringos. And then that's the drawing we got. And so you can see he's really not human. Had tons of discussions about his toes. And you know, he's hunched over, he's much more aggressive. And the other thing that was really key about the Muton is I wanted to key all the alien stuff sort of off of his armor. And so we sort of started going away from the armor you just saw and getting into, starting to get UFOs at this point, and getting into, you know, I wanted organic Art Deco, like I wanted it to be long, flowing lines, you know, not sharp edges, so it didn't look human. But I wanted to have a repetition of line. And so this is where we got, and this is really where pretty much all the alien tech really stemmed out of it first. And here's his head. Again, a little more threatening. When I first saw this, I mean, he's just soulless. You know, he's got those eyes are just hollow. It's pretty creepy. And that's where we ended up with the concept. And there's the final. That's the guy in the game. Not really. Who's worth renting? Then we got to the floater, and I haven't really done anything on the floater much. But you know, one of the things that we also stumbled into was in the original game. The original game's awesome, but back in the time when they made that game, you know, there were just pretty easy conventions of okay, how you communicate something's evil. You know, everybody that knows, you know, Darth Vader's black, Luke Skywalker's white. You know, it's you know, the Ranger wears a white hat, the bad guy wears a black hat. It's you know, simple colors and stuff. But what they were doing was, you know, if you were evil, you had horns, you had a cape, or you had shoulder pads. And depending on how evil you were was what combination of the three you had. So the floater has, you know, the horns and the cape. And he was a particularly hard one to do because, again, he's not a particularly new idea, especially in games. I mean, there's, you know, a bunch of games you can look at that have similar characters. And at one point, he was a little longer like the original concept. And he was a little bit of an issue because he actually couldn't get in cover very well. And the design changed where he needed to be able to get cover. And so we ended up making him a little more machine-like. And I think quite a bit more original than what we had the first pass. But you can see this is the very first drawing of him when he was realized. And that's the difference. So, you know, I kind of wanted those eyes to be important. Other thing is I wanted to be obvious that he was floating. So with the jetpacks and such. And the thing about him is, you know, the one word for him is maniacal. And I wanted him to kind of have that. And I think that he's one of those characters where, unlike the original, I think we do a lot more with the animation in our game. And so, you know, I wanted his animations to be really aggressive and really maniacal. So that was one of the things we really tried to push on him. So we had that extra dimension that I don't think you really had in '93 when you were making a sprite-based game. Yeah.
The folders and the Mutons were designed in tandem, right? Because in game, isn't it said that they're like the same species, but the folders are lose their legs and get jetpacks instead?
No, I mean, I think we didn't get too deep into that at first. I think we were really more concerned with the design considerations, like what we wanted to communicate to the player as far as how they played. And then that information was a little bit secondary. But yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of that, but I didn't find it restrictive, I guess, as we were developing them. Not sure if I answered your question. And then the Chryssalid. This character was really cool because he was the, again, you know, he's revered, and to me, I was actually kind of a little bit apprehensive about working on him, but he was actually the easiest alien we made. The very first drawing that ended up being the Chryssalid was actually a page of thumbs for a completely different character. And as soon as I saw it was the one that stood out on the page, and A, didn't fit with the other ones, but was immediately the Chryssalid. And so the one thing I wanted to keep from this character, like A, I didn't want to be bipedal because, you know, we didn't need to be bipedal, but also that crazy like clown face that he's got. Like that kind of, again, that sort of soulless, very blank, the eyes, and that kind of feature. And so you can actually see the thumb. This was the original drawing that started him. It was just there. It was a little tiny thing. And then that's the drawing of him that we had moved toward. And that's where he is. And I think you see, like, you know, I think we've got that same like featureless face. Almost looks like he's wearing a hockey mask sort of feeling. But he was the easiest one to do. And then the Cyberdisc. This was a fun one. So again, it's, you know, we want it to be an enigma, you know, it's a flying disc. I mean, what can you do with that? How do you make an alien? And so the one thing we really wanted to do was it to be, you didn't know if it was going to heal you, you didn't know if it was going to attack you, you didn't know if it was going to communicate you, what it was going to do. And so this is the drawing we came up with. Bryce's drawing. And this is the one that when we saw it, we were like, this is it. We wanted to be really reflective and essentially a clown clown. More stuff comes out of it when he opens up than could possibly have fit in him. And that's what it looks like when you close. Again, the more flowing organic lines, and figuring out how those work was particularly fun for Bryce. So that when those open, they actually were parts that were used for the open state as well as the closed state. And again, we're doing some magic there. There's not those parts that really fit in there. There's some expansion going on when they come out. And that's what he looks like when he's opened up. So that little disc just translates to this. Probably my favorite character in the game. Absolutely love him. And then the Sectopod. This was one of those ones where we came out of the gate saying we're going to do this completely different, and put this one away. Didn't even really look back at this thing, and we went full circle, long, convoluted process, and then we ended up coming down here. Looks a little bit similar. At least his legs and stuff. Yeah, just his posture is the same, and it was funny if we did this. You know, I look back and I'm like, wow, we're actually pretty close to what the original had done. And there's the in-game versus the 93 version. And the Ethereal. He must be really evil because he doesn't have a face, he's got shoulder pads, and he's got a cape. So, this was another one that didn't go through too many versions on. We went through a few, but yeah, we knew we wanted the red robes. We wanted to hide what was underneath of him. He's a bit of the Dementor from Harry Potter, a little bit. And so, whoa, what happened to my concept? Oh, there we go. That's where we came down on him after some revisions. And again, we had the red cloak, we had the faceless hole in the mask, but it wasn't a hood. He didn't look like a monk from someplace. But but we wanted it to feel a little bit religious almost, and we wanted to come across with a sort of regal feel with him. And so he's got a bit of a headdress and the robes, little tassel-y kind of things. But yeah, he was a pretty cool character. And that's where comparison. So in a lot of cases, we came down really close to where the original did, but it was intentional, but not. We really didn't want to be holding on to what they did necessarily. We didn't want to change just to change. Then we got the vehicles, and this was pretty fun. As you can see the same process real quick with the Skyranger. We went through, drawing after drawing of these, and doing these are hard. Again, I want a fresh. He's the sectoid of the humans. I want something new that I've never seen before, but it still needs to look like it makes sense. And so we went through all these different revisions of the Skyranger, and there's way more drawings than this. And this was where we had first come down. And yet, the Skyranger is on the map, so it actually plays a role in the game. And its role changed back and forth throughout the process of game development. But this is where we come down, and we were pretty happy with this at first, but it still didn't really look like it would fly very well, and it was a little strange. And then this drawing happened, and the design had changed a little bit, where the Skyranger is a little bit more off the screen, and wasn't quite the same. And we threw another version of the troops all going from the front, which was really weird. I don't know what I was drinking that morning. and when I saw this, though, I was like, this looks futuristic, but it still looks sort of contemporary, and I think it will work. And it was funny, after I had done that, back when we had the GI cover in January, I actually looked at the original, and I was kind of like, wow, we actually came pretty close, not trying to. Because we really, completely thrown it. I couldn't even remember that drawing at the time. And so, for fun, I had the concept guy make a version of this for GI to see just how close we actually came. And we even picked up some of if you're really into the game, you'll notice that it's got the original call signal from the original Skyranger. And we picked up some of the different color key information, the paint job information. And then the Interceptor. You can see the original film that this came from and how it got pressed up. But this one was a fun thing too, because it has to look cooler than anything that's already out there, but it's still contemporary because you still have to make the Firestorm. So you had to leave yourself some room. And so this is where we came up. And again, when you look at the two, we actually weren't that far off from the original, surprisingly. So anyway, that's about it. How are we doing? Yeah, good time. So, anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Because the camera is so far pulled back in game, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced in sort of deciding what levels of detail to give to various assets?
Well, that's great. Really good question. I don't know if you've seen the previous movie that we made, but we did that first. And the whole point of that previous movie wasn't for marketing, wasn't even that it would ever go out the door or be seen, but it was, we wanted to establish camera distances for playability. One of the things we focused on really early was the presentation layer of the game. And I think people, when they think about art direction, they tend to think about what I just showed you, and the character design and the visual design. And while that's a part of the job, probably an even larger part of the job is actually the presentation layer of the game. And that's where I thought we had the biggest room to improve with our version. Because it's a 3D game, we can actually move the camera around where we wanted. So that was going to be a big part of our process, was moving the camera in, making you feel more immersed in the game instead of keeping you out. And we thought that was kind of a new take on strategy games. Like, you really didn't see that. Like, when you see a strategy game, typically the camera isn't really considered. And so by establishing that very early, it was we were working in a room. It was 10 artists locked in a room, literally locked in a room. we had the designer was still working on Civ Rev, and so Jake would come down for half-hour day, and we'd look at stuff, and I'd be like, okay, can you play the game here? And we were Mac, so we didn't even have an engine at that point. And so I moved the camera out and be like, can you play like this? Do you think you can play like this? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, pull it back a little further. He's like, can you see enough? Yeah. And so what we were trying to do at that point was trying to establish the largest and smallest aliens. Make sure that you actually play the game there, and then like what would happen when you move the camera in. We established where the cameras were, but once we actually started getting things into the engine, we noticed that the detail level was we were still too Gears of War, we were still too detailed. And we were getting some noise, and it was hard to read the weapons or the soldiers. And so we started stylizing away from that, and we started chunkifying everything, making things a little more readable, making things a little more bulked, and really started to embrace that action figure role. And when we had done that movie, we actually, I basically locked out the whole company for what we were doing. So if you're on the team, you got to see concept stuff and all that, and it was partially, it wasn't because I wanted to be a jerk, it was because I wanted to actually have everybody in the company see what we're doing at once, and not see a concept of a sectoid and the concept of and get desensitized to what we're doing. And then at that point too, you're only looking at a little portion of what's happening, you're not seeing the whole. So at one point we showed this whole movie after four months of being completely dark to everybody, and the whole company saw it at once. But when we did that, we actually, after I did that, I opened up to the whole company, 2 or 3 days of like scheduled times where we'd actually do an open critique on anything that we had at that point. And somebody said, well, they weren't very familiar with XCOM. This person said, well, it doesn't look like a real soldier. I'm like, yeah, it's not. They don't have helmets. they originally didn't have helmets. And he said, well, they look like action figures. And I'm like, you know what? You're exactly right. They're not Call of Duty. They're G.I. Joe. And so at that point, we really started pushing the proportions and the readability once we knew where the cameras were. But once you have the presentation figured out where the cameras are going to be, at that point you can start figuring out your style. I think a lot of times people miss that. But for us, that was paramount to what we were doing. So yeah, at that point we really started focusing on that, and it had to work for both cameras. It had to work for the camera out and the camera in. And at one point we went way too far. We had things really chunky, and when the camera went in, silly. And so we had to find that balance. And I think we did a pretty decent job of finding that readability. I mean, you're not going to find much visual shimmer in our game, like things don't sparkle, like in a weird, like noisy way. So yeah, at another point we had a group art meeting with the whole art department of Firaxis, and a guy from another team, and actually said, he's like, I like your anti-aliasing, it was awesome. And we're like, there is no full screen anti-aliasing in Unreal. And it was really because of the way we were modeling and the way we were creating our assets that was lending itself to looking much cleaner and more readable. So I think that answers it, right?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The guys in 1993 did some of the similar things to what you did. I mean, they had an idea of the game rules, the gameplay, the modeling, the designs, and that sort of thing. And I can see an advantage of trying to go back and get some of their development work and their pre-approved designs and their concept and that sort of thing. But I can also see an advantage of sort of remaining, to some extent, deliberately agnostic to the development history, so that you can build from the game experience as the players experienced it. So I'm wondering if you thought about that sort of give and take.
Yeah, we did. I mean, I think that was part of the process. We wanted to be certainly respectful of what they did, because they did an awesome job. I mean, it's one of the best games ever. But we also didn't want to be slaves to it. So we would start out, we'd look at it, and then we just flip it over and put it away. All right, go. And then, it's funny how that's how our process went for all that. And at the end of the day, when you look at them next to each other, our answers weren't that different. And we went full circle in some cases. And part of it was dictated by gameplay, part of it was dictated by, the common lore that we share. But it was pretty amazing. Their decisions were, in a lot of cases, really solid. So yeah, like we tried to kind of like be aware of it, and definitely be, you know, very respectful. But then also give ourselves the freedom to make changes when we felt we could improve it. So, yeah.
Has there been any thought about repurposing your core gameplay engine to other genres?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm still recovering. So, but you know, I mean, I would hope that we would do something like that. But I'm hoping that, you know, maybe we see more strategy games start to get some attention. But yeah, I don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet.
Are there any plans or ideas sort of floating around about doing something involving Terror from the Deep as either like DLC or a new game?
Again, I'm still recovering.
Oh.
I don't know. I mean, at that point, everything's still, the paint's still pretty wet. So, yeah, I don't know.
What was the, I guess, creative process or, you know, thinking behind bringing down the team size to around 6?
You know, that's more of a Jake question than a me question. But, you know, I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with the scale of the world and the intimacy of the player and the fact that, you know, we had some different elements of the character customization that weren't in the original that made them a little bit more precious. I mean, I think I feel it more when my soldiers die in our XCOM than in the other XCOM, the original XCOM. And so, I mean, that was all a big part of it. It was also, you know, again, I think they scale appropriately to our game. And that's one of those differences. I mean, we tried a bunch of different numbers of units. And it really just came down to a matter of what felt right. I don't know if that's a great answer, but it's, you know, we went round robin on everything. We tried it. And so, you know, when we kind of came down on that, that was what we felt made sense. What's that? Yeah, I mean, you know, I was the king of that in the original. My rookies were my scouts. They were may as well just have a flashlight and walk out. But yeah, so I mean, with this, you know, I think that, and I think it's one of the things about the game that's been so well received is the permadeath. Like, you know, you lose a guy, you lose him, and it just hurts a little bit more because there are a little bit less of them in the field. So, but it I don't know. To me, it feels right for the game that we have. So.
How long in the development cycle did you still have the guys starting out in the Skyranger and walking out and dying, versus spawning out in the field?
Oh, God, I don't even know. I don't know. That was probably maybe 2 years ago. At least cut that. It's been a long process. So it's all kind of blurry at this point. So, but yeah, it's been a while.
It was always been big.
Yeah. Good.
So when it came to like making the trailer, I know it didn't really feature like the gameplay. Was that because I know like on the TV commercials, is that so like maybe like people who wouldn't play like a strategy game would have fought in the game maybe or just tried it out at least? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, you know, we really wanted to reach people that maybe had never heard of XCOM, had never thought of playing XCOM, or even people that, you know, maybe had a negative opinion of the word strategy. You know, I think we're crossing into some new territory with this game, the way we've done it, and we're really trying to, you know, I've read a lot of posts where people are like, wow, I don't play strategy games, but I'm going to pick this up. And we were really deliberately trying to attract those people to say, hey, give this a shot, you know, and hoping that it would help the genre in general. So yeah, that was definitely initially very, very intentional.
Speaking about the iteration of the changing from the old version to the new version, you talk a lot about all this experimentation you're doing. What kind of development cycles was there? How long was each iteration of saying, okay, we got to change this, let's make it again, put it back in, see how it looks?
On the visual side?
Yeah, visual side.
Or on the design side? You know, I mean, we played it by ear. I mean, it was a little bit like, you know, mostly the times we changed things visually, there was a design reason. There was a design change or an ability change or a purpose change. Like the Skyranger changing in a lot of cases, you know, the the restrictions that I was under to have it perform a certain way changed. And so it freed me up to do something a little different. And each time I was able to get something cooler. Generally, that was pretty much the case for everything that I would go through an iteration on. We also rarely model anything. Our concept guys are great. So we rarely take something to model before we proved it in 2D. So we explore, my concept guys might hate me because I'm always, hey, make it fresh, but make it familiar. We spend a lot of time in that stage just kind of exploring 2D because it's so much faster. Once you start making a model, to make a character, you're looking at easily 3 weeks to model, and our guy's pretty quick. And the real buddy is when you start animating, because we have more animations in XCOM than any other game we've done. So, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars development-wise. So we try to avoid that, make sure we're really happy with the visual at the 2D stage before, and that's why I think the concepts are pretty close to what we modeled, and so yeah, we try to avoid that.
Were there any alien concepts that ended up being removed, or, for example, Lizardmen, did they end up being designed and then cut, or?
Well, no, Lizardman, Snakeman was I was kind of not a fan of Snakeman, just because I thought the whole idea was a little bit silly. He's a snake, but he's got hands and a laser gun. But I think when you look at characters like the Thin Man, he is definitely paying some homage to, and he's sort of reptilian. He's, he kind of fits that a little bit, but he's a little more palatable for me. So, but yeah, I mean, we explored a lot of different aliens, a lot of different ideas, and there's some things that just didn't make it in for gameplay reasons or such. But yeah, there's some stuff that was on the cutting room floor that's still in the vault. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love the game and the direction it went. I think it really did do a good job of bringing new people in the strategy genre. But I remember in an interview before the game was released, there was talk that when you first made the game, you took the original game and built it in a new modern engine and everything.
Oh.
And then you said, oh yeah, and then you changed it to make it more like a modern game. But you said it might have been released as an unlock or something in the future. Is there any chance of that still happening, or is that too much? Because I know a lot of people just buy it on the spot as DLC or something.
So, this is funny. You should keep your eyes peeled. I'm trying to see something very soon. But no, I mean, it's I don't think you want to play it. I've actually been spending some time kind of archiving and doing some stuff, and I actually had that build. I have that build on my Xbox at the office, and I was playing it. Oh my god! Like, I thought this was good. Like, it was. If you've seen the previous movie that we made, and then and then play that, we were so far. I think we were actually pretty far off the mark, other than the subject matter. It didn't feel like the previous that we had made. It felt slow, it was kind of clunky. It just didn't feel right. I mean, honestly, the time units when I went back to play it were driving me crazy. But yeah, we did. We made the original game, and I think at that point it was really easy for us to look at and go, okay, what holds up, what doesn't hold up, where is this breaking down, and what isn't translating over the course of 17 years. And so we tried to, edit based on that. But yeah, I actually recently played that, and man, I looked at it, it was like, it's like watching Justice League. Like, when I was a kid, it looked so cool. And now I'm like, man, that is awful. It's the worst drawing ever. But yeah, so I don't know. But I don't know. I think we've been pretty open about our development process. And I think you're probably gonna see a little bit about that in the future. Okay. About, and you probably, yeah, it's. So I'm glad that Jake is a humble enough designer to really look at it and go, wow, this isn't working in certain places. So yeah, I'm much happier with the game we shipped. So yeah.
How glad are you that this game came out before the XCOM first-person shooter
I don't know. I mean, my brothers over at 2K Marine, they're making a cool game. I've talked to them a lot. We communicate. I'm excited to play what they're going to have. I'm excited for the fans that they got, a turn-based game first, because I think the hardcore fans wanted that. And so, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited to play that game when it comes out too. So, yeah, I'll go with that one.
Can you talk a little bit about the environment art direction? Were the characters always sort of the first and foremost thing you guys were working on, or how did the environment evolve?
The environment was a similar process. Like pretty much everything followed that sort of process where we kind of look at the original, put things away. The environments for the tactical maps were a little different in that, again, we're really trying to get gameplay. Like we were very truly gray box, because when we started this game, we didn't have an engine, we didn't have an asset library. Game reference was 17 years old. So, we were really starting from true gray box. And so we spent a lot more time figuring out, the game mechanics of the levels early. And then, again, it went through that same process of readability, and, destruction was always paramount. That was always a pillar of something we're going to do. And so as we went through and trying to make as the volume of maps that we wanted to make for the game, I mean, we have upwards of like 85 maps in the game, so it's a lot. And so, and we're a pretty small team. And so, we look for places that made sense. I mean, I think, when we did the farm stuff early, we explored that because we felt like that was right. And then, it was kind of hard to make hay cover. It's not super good. And I was actually pretty happy when we ended up, doing much more urban stuff to a degree, because it made it a little easier to have some commonality and cover and, things that made a little more sense visually. But they went through a little bit of that same process. But again, we really focused a lot on readability, and we wanted them to kind of everything kind of sit in the world. And in a lot of cases, trying to declutter it so that you could see the characters. There was a lot of that too. So, does that answer you?
Yeah.
It's kind of a follow-up to that. Like a lot of the UFOs and like the alien bases have funky angles that are going diagonally and stuff, so you can't get behind cover at them. Was that more? How much of that was driven by like art direction and the art style you wanted with the alien UFOs versus you deliberately wanted no cover when you're attacking inside the UFOs and everything?
Well, I think a lot of it was what I would deal with was straight up from design. The only part that really got art direction, and this is one thing that I'm actually the happiest about, was the visually, was the UFOs. Like again, I had to have a gray sectoid, and I had to have a saucer. Like those were like, if you ask me when I started the project, what do you have to have? Those are my two things. Because I think also once you get those things, then you can start getting weirder as you go, and people understand, like, okay, that's an alien. And then the next time they see something that's weirder, it's not as strange. And for us, I didn't want to see a cube on the ground, but the gameplay really doesn't do 45-degree angles. Most cover-based games don't. It's too hard to read it and figure out what's going on. But the roundness of the UFO is really a T, or a plus sign, the scouts. And there's only that little section that's angled. And so we with the energy shields, we were able to actually make it a pure cylindrical bit. But yeah, all that stuff was usually, our art level designers were pretty hard and fast about their designs. And then I would get a really, really crude gray box. When we started UFOs, I would kind of deal with that. So, yeah.
I know this isn't really art related, but I figured maybe you might have some insight having worked with the team. But I've noticed a very significant parallel between the general dynamics and rules of how the game plays and D&D 4.0. And I was wondering if that was intentional or just.
I don't know. That would be a Jake question. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, we've played a lot of different games, and we're constantly checking out other games that are the big other games out there. So, yeah.
So the game's built on the Unreal Engine. Like, why did you choose that? Like, just restrictions you had like other engines, or is it just like use this?
Well, 2K was really supportive of it.
Yeah.
But B, you know, when we showed that initial previs movie, you know, it was, for us it was a little bit weird because we had, you know, 4 months of artists working on the game before we had any code support at all. And we wanted to show the programmers what we wanted to make. And when we, with the CivRev engine, we would never have been able to make XCOM and make the number of levels. And so, you know, when we purchased Unreal, it was really mainly because, you know, the tool set. It's the best tool set out there as a developer. And it also makes it easy to hire people because you have Unreal experience. So, but yeah, we really bought it for the tool set. So artists could get up and running as fast as they could, and we could really focus on the game. But yeah, the programmers actually had a meeting afterwards. And they were just like, you know, I don't think CivRev's engine is going to do this. Let's look at our options. And at that point, you know, 2K was amazingly supportive. They were just like, hey, why don't you check out Unreal? And so we did, and got on pretty quick on that. And you know, it was the fastest way to expedite getting the game going, to be honest. And you know, we sat around and we made that choice. It was a very hard choice for us because we've never done that. And we, as leads, we sat around the table. We said 2 years from now we need to, because we know we're shipping in 2 years, and 5 years later. But we said, you know, we want to be able to say that was the right choice. And you know, not 2 years later, but 5 years later, I would guarantee we'd all say, yeah, it was the right choice. You know, I don't think we would have been able to get the game done the way we wanted without it. Anything else? All right. Probably pretty close to the time. Yes. All right. Great. Thanks for coming, guys.